All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Mike Whitmire. I'm the co-founder and CEO of FloQast, inactive CPA, and welcome to our latest episode of Blood, Sweat, and Balance Sheets. Today's guest, very, very appropriate for the title here. So Michelle Murray, welcome aboard. She's an accountant turned entrepreneur. So I'm really excited to chat through your background. So want to kick it off, introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about what you're all about.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here. And thanks for pronouncing my company's name correctly, Segway Partners. So many times people are like, Segui, Segu. They're not really sure how to say that. It is the English. It is a real English word. And it means a smooth transition, which is one of the reasons that we selected the word because
yes,
we are an outsourced accounting and fund administration firm. Primarily, we work in kind of the intersection of private wealth. So our services encompass working with venture funds, private equity funds, family offices, basically handle all of their investor relations and financial reporting. And we also work with venture-backed startups. And so what I've seen in my career basically is, from formation all the way to wind down, companies transition, obviously, as you know, as your own entrepreneur. And through that transition, you need different skill sets, different groups of people, different expertise. And basically, my firm hopes to be a value-added sort of one-stop shop as your fund transitions from formation to wind down.
And just for some basics, how long has Segway been around? How big is the company?
Great question. So actually, next month, we will be celebrating our 10 years in business.
Wow, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. And we have 11 current employees full-time and growing. We're actually starting a new class of cohorts.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
Very soon. We're primarily based in St. Louis. That's where our quote corporate headquarters are. But we do have employees that work in other locations of the U.S., but our clients are everywhere. So we're currently, I realize there's 50 states, but I'm proud to say we're in 9 of them.
It makes that.
And plus Canada actually too.
Oh, okay. International. There you go.
International, yeah. Can't really say global because it's still only North America, but someday.
Yep. As soon as we bagged our first Canadian client, we were international, and then as soon as we got someone in the UK, global. There we go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. So I'd love to fund administration. It's a term we hear. I'm not exactly sure what the day-to-day or month-to-month looks like. Could you just walk us through that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do a lot of guest lecturing at St. Louis University and Washington University, and I have this canned sort of pitch called VC 101 that really kind of takes people through, students and MBA students through what the heck is venture capital.
Well, let's touch on that. I think the audience would love it.
There's a lot of mysteries around venture capital. So the best way I can describe it is, you have perhaps some investments, your 401k, let's say, and some of it is invested in, publicly traded stocks or maybe an index fund or bond funds. But institutions and also really affluent, accredited, quote unquote, which is an SEC official term, investors have obviously a lot more money at their disposal to potentially lose, but also potentially to invest and gain. And there is, sort of an asset class called alternative assets. And they're very high risk, but potentially high reward. And within that alternative asset class includes private companies that, are not registered. You can't look them up on Yahoo, and you don't know what their ticker symbol is and can't do any research on them. But they raise private money basically from usually professional money managers like venture capitalists and also angel investors, accredited investors. So most of the...
Sorry to cut you off. Could you just define accredited investor
for
the audience?
Why did you do that to me? They actually just changed the rules on me. And so
did they make it? Well, I know the old rules. Did they make it easier or harder to be accredited?
They made it easier. They actually made it easier.
I have a gripe. If I could go on a rant for a second, the way accredited investors were, the way it was taught to me was you needed to have $1 million of liquidity, be considered an accredited investor. And the wording from the teacher, I'll never forget. He goes, basically what the government is saying is if you haven't made $1 million yet, you're too dumb to make these investment decisions.
Oh gosh. Well, I would put it as so there's a couple of different hoops you have to jump through. Do you have, adequate disposable income that you could lose it and it won't impact, kind of your lifestyle? Do you make more than $200,000 a year? Or do you have $1 million in investable, assets? Now they're taking into account like the value of your home and what type of job you have. So they've loosened the definition quite a bit, but that's just come out in the last couple of weeks.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah. Sorry to put you on the spot. For context, okay. I know zero about that. So you're winning that game.
That's okay. Not a problem at all. So basically these institutional investors, which would include like a pension fund, endowment funds, a trust,
governments as well.
Governments, or let's put them aside for a minute, but like governmental pensions funds, yes, like CalPERS, the big teachers pension fund. They want to invest in this alternative asset class to diversify their portfolio. So they might invest in real estate investment trusts, REITs, private equity, hedge funds, and venture capital is kind of a small slice of this. So when you're a venture fund manager or a private equity manager, you go out and raise money from these investors to accomplish a certain strategy. So let's say you are specifically well known in the nutrition and food and wellness area. And so your strategy might be to identify startup companies that are are targeting these markets, or animal health, or tech, software, or broadly speaking, life sciences. So each venture fund has its own strategy. They pull this money together, and then they identify startup companies to purchase their stock. Obviously I could go on a wholly separate podcast in terms of like what venture capitalists do for a living. I'm a recovering venture capitalist. I've spent 10 years in doing it, so I know a few things. But you're doing due diligence. You're identifying opportunities. You're trying to understand how these companies will exit, and obviously the whole idea here is to make money. You'll sit on their boards, and so there's a lot to do as a venture capital or private equity fund manager. And a lot of the behind the scenes, the compliance, the setting up your investors on a secure portal, creating the books quarterly, reporting to these investors, making sure you have a clean audit, making sure there are sophisticated processes and segregation of duties. Everything I just mentioned kind of encompasses fund administration.
Yep.
A lot of times venture capital folks are just like you, successful entrepreneurs. They've operated their own businesses. They've raised their own money. And now they want to go out and do that for other people, manage other people's money. And, they get paid obviously to do so. Mm-hmm. And the last thing they think of when they don't start wanting to raise a venture capital fund and invest in new, unique, growing opportunities so that they can kind of deal with the dotting your I's and crossing your T's minutia behind the scenes. So basically that's what we do.
I mean, it's super interesting. I think a lot of people are maybe led down the wrong path by the Shark Tank of the world, thinking, it's these rich people. We're going to pitch them and hopefully they give us money. When I got into this world, it is fascinating to understand how much time the VCs themselves spend raising money. I was like, wow. Yes. And it has a very practical impact on you. I remember there was a time I was raising money and the partner was like, hey man, we just got to put this on hold because we're raising our fund.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whoa, interesting. Okay.
And as you know from raising outside money, raising money is a full-time job. And you have to be prepared to do so. Your books have to be ready. Your due diligence questionnaires and checklists have to be ready. No different. And your legal documents have to be clean and ready. No different than an entrepreneur who's raising money. These VCs do the exact same thing. And as well, I'll just say private funds, but broadly speaking, that means a professional fund manager raising any type of fund, a REIT, hedge fund, private equity, or venture. But specifically, my background is in the venture and private equity space, and so that's what we focus on. But we also have family office clients, wealthy, affluent families who have decided, you know what, I'm going to hire a couple of people and make some of these investments on my own. But then guess what? Someone's got to, monitor the books and report to the family, make sure the K1s are issued on time.
We got to book the dividend income, pay the credit card statement. It's all the little, you're a full shop for. I actually interned for a high net worth individual in college. Got to do all that fun stuff in QuickBooks. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
So now you were inside of the venture world as well. So I'd love to hear more about those years. Yeah.
Yeah. So for 10 years, I actually, at the time I was living in Boulder, Colorado. And I was not skiing because being a CPA, that time of year doesn't lend itself to, enjoying the fresh powder on the mountains.
And let's circle back to some more of your CPA years a little.
Yeah. But I was working for Clifton Gunderson, which is now Clifton Larson Allen. But at the time, it was about number 13 on the list. I had relocated to Boulder from living in St. Louis. And loved hiking and enjoying the mountains, little bit of mountain biking, a lot of snowshoeing in the winter.
Nice.
But I was interested in relocating back home to St. Louis. And I remember networking with some of my former colleagues at Ernst & Young, telling them that I wanted to go into venture capital. And they were just laughing at me like, why are you moving to St. Louis to get into venture capital?
Fair question.
Yeah. But the reason I wanted to go into venture capital was because most of my clients that I was auditing or, consulting with while I was at Clifton Gunderson had raised venture capital or angel money. And so, it was just inspiring. I've always loved working with entrepreneurs. Even when I was at Ernst & Young, I specialized in the ES department, which now is pretty much defunct because I'm old, but it was called Entrepreneurial Services. So a lot of pre-IPO companies, software companies, tech. And I just, really had a bug for working with these dreamers, these folks who, had this passion for starting something new and being innovative. And I wanted to figure out how to help them. So long story short, a new fund was cropping up basically in St. Louis. It was a first-time fund. And it was 3 partners, all of whom came from various backgrounds, but suffice it to say, they were operators, and some had raised money in the past.
Okay.
And they were focused on life sciences, which was a very broad definition. And we're going back, 20 years ago. So basically our focus was medical devices, pharmaceutical drugs, and we also did a lot in nutrition and wellness. And so I was actually the CFO and director there for 10 years.
Okay.
And nice. While I guess in my last year or so, I had this idea of marrying my public accounting experience because I always loved working with a variety of clients, staying challenged with what that meant with keeping up with a variety of different types of businesses. And I wanted to marry those skills and help venture funds because what I realized in my role was that hedge funds had fund administrators and they would never think about doing all of the back office compliance and reporting themselves. They were offloading that to bona fide fund administration firms. But going back 10 plus years ago, there weren't a lot of firms doing fund administration. Mm-hmm. It mostly was individual CFOs, like myself, who where I was in my role at Prologue Ventures, kind of hanging out their shingle and having just a few clients. But it was mostly just themselves, not trying to really build a scalable, viable, company. And so that's what I decided I wanted to do. And so I did a lot of market research, talked to a lot of peers. My husband happens to be a lawyer, so he very quickly drafted an operating agreement and we launched.
Right.
Yeah. But I basically was still working 100% still at Prologue and just kind of dabbling with this idea. But then 6 months later, I jumped ship and jumped in with both feet.
And very cool. And how did you get the opportunity to be the CFO? That's a difficult part of career progression is just how do you even get that opportunity?
How do you get that opportunity? Well, I definitely would say working for a firm like Segway Partners, or like in my case, Ernst & Young, gives you a great exposure to a lot of different industries, a lot of best practices on how to do things. And, early in your career, if you go into, even though we don't provide any assurance services, I still think of Segway Partners like a public accounting firm.
Yeah.
Because at a very young age, in a very few years' time, you will gain exposure to a tremendous amount of work. Whereas if you graduated with an accounting or finance degree and went to work for a corporation, at least in my experience, it takes a long time to kind of move up that ladder. And sometimes there are many, many years in between the rungs of the ladder. Whereas with public accounting, very quickly you get kind of the full circle, all the ins and outs. And, you're meeting with executives, you're meeting with, managing partners of funds or CEOs and CFOs of companies. And so I think, the reason I became the CFO was because of those types of experiences. Just having a broad base of early experiences.
I would say you and I had a pretty similar experience at EY. And first of all, I think we made it for like the exact same amount of time, almost 4 years. I was originally a 2-year guy and I almost made it to 4. I was very proud of that.
Yeah.
And then another thing that happened is I kind of inadvertently landed in the mid-market space. Mm-hmm. And so I had multiple clients that I got to rotate around to over the course of the year. And, meanwhile, a lot of my peers in LA were put on big entertainment companies. If you end up on Sony or Universal,
you're never moving off.
And it's just there's not as much of a learning opportunity there. No. So, and I think it's very hard for first-year auditors to recognize that and think, I hope I don't get. It's for some people. I hope I don't get pulled onto one big job and get stuck at that location. So I would say for any of the auditors listening, if you want to learn the most at the firm, it really would be in your best interest to try to get on as many engagements as possible and get exposed to small. And that's also, you have a higher probability of talking to the CFO.
That's right.
I'm not going to talk to the CFO of Universal, but I talked to the CFO of Concord Record Labels. No one knows who they are, but I got to talk to the CFO and learn about everything they do.
No, you're exactly right, Michael. Actually, my first, few months at Ernst & Young, I was on Peabody Coal. So I was underground in coal mines.
Whoa.
That was really exciting, in Henderson, Kentucky. And,
wow, you were in it. That's the coal. That is.
I was literally in it.
Yeah.
Taking inventory of all kinds of random things. Another one of my clients was a large retail company. And you're right. I mean, some of my peers who went into kind of the SEC world with these large publicly traded companies, they never left the field of that client. But I did have the opportunity to kind of specialize in this entrepreneurial type services, which, I think that's one of the reasons I moved to, Clifton Gunderson, because that was mostly their base, so like these national / regional firms, I think offer a lot to the, the new accounting career person that didn't happen 30 years ago when I graduated, mostly because of Sarbanes-Oxley, It gave them a lot of new opportunity and all the partner rotation. And it really helps those middle market firms grow tremendously.
You got to love regulation. It creates new work for us every single year. Keep it coming. Does. PCAOB, SEC, AICPA, appreciate it all. Let's go.
Yeah.
And so EY, you got some valuable experience there. Sounds like some good networking through the kind of smaller companies at CLA, and then that helped you get an opportunity in the VC world. Any as you recall your time there, were there any any stories or any things that happened to you that were particularly impactful in your entrepreneurial journey?
Oh gosh, probably too many to think of. But for sure, one thing I did right, and I don't know if I recognized it at the time, but this is sort of a recommendation for for anybody in any career path, but in particular new people in the field, is to continue to network and stay in touch with people that you work with and build those relationships. Because I'll guarantee. So in between Ernst & Young and Clifton Gunderson, I was recruited to go to work for one of my clients who had just won the EOY Entrepreneur of the Year award, and about $150 million revenue company. And I was hired to be the right hand to the CFO. And, this is back when AP departments were, like 10 people.
Right. Yep.
And we literally had one person, and all she did was bank recs every day, all day. Now, QuickBooks syncs with your bank, and it memorizes it, and you just double check that the AI was correct, right?
Yeah.
So again, going back a few years, so I was, like 24 years old or 24, and I was literally supervising over 20 people were reporting to me.
Wow.
Now, I don't even have 20 people in my firm, now. But that was back in the day where you needed a lot more humans to get things done. But I would not have landed that job without making a connection, a personal connection with my client. I would not have moved from that company, Knight Williams, to Clifton Gunderson without having good references and staying connected with people that I worked with at Ernst & Young. So in this 2-year stint while I was at this private company, I kept up with these people. And then for the 4 years or so that I lived in Boulder, I also kept up with the people at Knight's and the people at Ernst & Young. Yeah. And so when I was looking to relocate from Boulder, I just, picked up the phone and made some appointments and had lunches and breakfast, with some of these old colleagues of mine. And it was like time had not completely disappeared. I'd been gone, from the firm for almost 6 years. So 6 years can go by in a blink of an eye. And if you don't maintain those relationships, to pick up the phone 6 years later is a little awkward if you haven't heard from these people before or since then. And that, I credit those skills, which I didn't know purposefully I was keeping, I didn't know why I was keeping up with these relationships. And I think definitely everything we do is a relationship business, and my firm today has grown solely by word of mouth, from keeping up with the clients we have and keeping up with the network that I've built through my career. So I don't have any particular stories except, that my story is thanks to the people that I've previously worked with and had developed relationships with that I am here today. I have to credit my connections.
No, and I know if you run a successful consulting firm for 10 years, that means you have good relationships, you provide great services, and that's how you make it. My mom runs a consulting firm as well, has never done a minute of business development, sales, marketing, nothing like that. It's referred because people love her. She does great work. And I just want to double down on a couple points you made. So one is with client relationships. I think oftentimes in the audit and accounting dynamic, we can view it as a bit adversarial. My piece of advice is your clients can be people who really help accelerate your career, and treat it as client service and try to be nice to them and good to them and reasonable and have them like you. Because yes, that has served me personally very well. My goal was always to make the audit as easy on the client as I possibly could. And just, if you think that way, it's gonna pay off for you personally down the road. And then we had another guest, an advisor of mine personally, and he goes, networking's so important. He's the former CFO of eBay, CFO of Yelp. And he goes, I'm out of EY, I'm an accountant, networking's not natural for me. So I maintain a spreadsheet. He goes, I have a rule of 40. He goes, so I have this rule of 40. I have 40 contacts I want to stay in touch with. 20 of them get an email from me once a year. Just, hey, hope you're doing well. Was thinking about you. Here's how the year's been for me. Hope all is well. Then the other 20 are the people he wants to maintain more constant contact with. So that's a quarterly email. And hey, here's what's going on. Would love to grab the lunch or some drinks or whatever. And he just said that, to your point, keeps you top of mind. 6 years can go by in a blink of an eye. but it takes you 20 minutes to send six annual, emails and maintain that relationship. And then it's not weird when you give them a call. So for the accountants where it's not natural like you, it just seems like it's just in your DNA. It's natural. It's not like that for all of us. Just get a checklist going and you can maintain that stuff.
Yeah. And I think, it's kind of interesting because it has always been a little bit more natural in my DNA. I definitely, can sort of blame or thank those skills that I have for being able to raise hundreds of millions of dollars from institutional investors, because I am a little more on the sales and marketing side, probably than most accountants. But I do think that the people coming up now have the benefit of social media, and you can stay in touch with people so easily through that. And you can kind of hide behind the screen. You can make yourself look more extroverted and, have these conversations going. And that is harder for me because I don't want to be behind. I don't want to sit and click LinkedIn constantly and share stuff. So now I have to kind of hire people and assign them those duties.
Totally get it.
It can all work out. If you're not an extrovert, then I think in this day and age, it might work out actually more beneficially for you, because you might like clicking buttons more, than having a real personal conversation. So.
And the world's not as formal as it used to be, right? You can just shoot a LinkedIn message real quick. Hey, hope you're well. I was just thinking about you. Best of luck with everything. Boom. And that's all it takes.
Exactly. And I do think networking and being involved in some type of organization is so important. Through my career, I can't tell you how many opportunities I've had to help somebody connect with someone because they're out of a job. And, it's so interesting. In fact, someone I used to work with at Ernst & Young years ago, I don't know if he was the partner, but in my mind, because I was a young, up and coming accountant, he was definitely high up there. Like if he wasn't a partner, he almost was. And a few years ago, maybe it's been 5 years ago, he randomly reached out to me because he was out of work. Mm. And it's like, wow, you always think, the grass is greener. This guy's set. Wow, he was almost a partner at Ernst & Young. And like now he's reaching out to little old me, Yeah. who was at least a decade younger than him in his career path. And he's asking me to help him, connect the dots and make some referrals. And so it is so important to be a part of some type of ecosystem, a trade organization, here in St. Louis, which is a national organization, ACG, Association for Corporate Growth. Yeah. There's just lots of them, take time to get involved in those. I'm very involved in a fabulous organization called EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, which is a worldwide organization, 14,000 plus members. And, through my involvement in EO, I could pick up the phone and have a connection to anyone in the world if I wanted to. Nice. And they, answer my call. We're very responsive to each other. And it's been a great opportunity for me to meet with like-minded entrepreneurs because, there's a saying, it's lonely at the top, right? If you're starting a company and you're an entrepreneur, who holds you accountable besides yourself, and so EO has been great for me because it's a group of people that can hold me accountable. And it's a learning organization. So they're constantly having, inviting us to things where there's phenomenal speakers and all that kind of stuff. So a little more career advice.
Do you have a co-founder or no?
I don't.
Yeah, for me, I have two co-founders, and it makes life easier having other people to bounce ideas off of. And, we're all stressed out. It's the same thing. So it is. And we hold each other accountable too. There is that. So I empathize with you being a solo entrepreneur. That must be particularly challenging. I do have two benefits or two pieces to the puzzle that help me. One is we've implemented, I don't know if you're familiar with the book called Traction. It's the EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. So I do have a leadership team here, and we meet every week, same time. And we go through, strategic issues. We identify what our strategic rocks are.
every quarter. And so we hold each other accountable, and that's a 4-person team. And then my husband is definitely someone who's been a great coach. He's an M&A attorney, seasoned partner at a firm, and I can run anything past him. So he definitely helps me.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So we are butting up against time. I know you need to head out here, but I was thinking as we've been chatting, I'm very impressed with how well spoken you are, and how I have to imagine your presentation skills are really good. As a former accountant, that's something that I had to proactively work on before starting my own company. Before FloQast, I was terrified to speak in front of people. The idea of doing this would have been way out there for me. So I had to work on it really hard. I'm curious, did you just kind of naturally have this charisma, these presentation skills, or is it something you worked on over time, or that just kind of naturally developed? Would love to hear more about it.
Gosh, well, thank you. First off, for the compliment.
Yeah.
I don't know really where they came from. I guess just through my upbringing, college and high school. Definitely being, sometimes just thrown into the fire and having to think on your feet quickly. I've definitely have been in countless, situations like that. The one thing I will say though is, being in the venture field, I did not have to present to people, but I heard thousands and thousands of pitches. And I'm sure that I have to credit some of those entrepreneurs who just, I probably absorbed through osmosis, some of their skills. And that includes skills of what not to do.
That's a very good point. That's an excellent point. Yeah.
Like for example, I always called them the potted plant. We were in St. Louis, but we were investing nationally. And I'll never forget one time this company who no doubt had very little funds, because we were seed and Series A investors, right? So they did not have funds to spare, but they flew like 5 people from California to St. Louis to pitch to us. And only the CEO did any kind of presentation. They had plenty of slides. In my mind, they could have at least given some, a few words at least to everybody else that they flew there. The scientific founder spoke a little bit, but mostly it was just the CEO. And they left, and I just thought to myself, why did they bring the potted plant? Like, if you're going to go to a presentation, have a reason to be there. Have something to say.
And as the potential investor, I'm just like, well, this would not have been a good use of my money. Why are we, how much are these flights out here? What are we doing? Can't they be doing better things at the office?
Exactly. That's exactly what you're thinking.
I don't take anyone to pitches with me. I go do all that stuff. That's wild. And
it is wild. So that's an example of things I've learned not to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're so spotted. The learning by osmosis. I'll tell you, I've learned from the VCs I've pitched who have said no to me. Yep. I've learned from all the executives that I've been fortunate enough to work with, and the mentors. It does just sort of seep into your brain there. And yet another pitch for working with smaller clients at the audit firm. Get more exposure to more executives, and that will help you with this part of their career. And this is so important.
Absolutely.
If you want to stay in audit, that's great. But if you want to make partner, you have to develop business. You got to close deals. You have to present. And also in terms of moving up through management, if you want to be a CFO or an entrepreneur, these are skills to work on. So
absolutely. We work with all of our, employees, all the personnel here, to get out there to network, to be able to converse with clients. I can't tell you how many clients tell me, your team is just not the typical group of accountants. And that's what we look for. Like, if you're a typical accountant, you're not going to fit in my culture. And whatever the typical accountant means, but usually that has a negative connotation.
It does. We're working to change that, but
we are working to change that. Yeah, absolutely. But
this is a great item to wrap on. So as we were prepping, you were mentioning you're hiring right now. So here we are in October 2020, and you just said you're at 11, and you're going. What's the headcount increase you're looking for?
I'm looking for at least 4 more people.
Awesome. And are you hiring in St. Louis only, or are you open to remote?
Well, it's interesting you said that. So we have been actually working back full time in our office since June 1, because we moved into new office space, new build out. We have a much larger footprint, and we can socially distance, and everyone has their own, private desk area. And stepping up all the sanitation, et cetera, to keep people safe. We've invested in new filtration systems throughout everybody's office.
Wow.
But having said that, we are exploring ways where we can expand our footprint remotely. And, just like we are remote when it comes to working with our clients, I think that we probably need to get a little more organized from a training perspective. But I would not throw it out of the equation to be able to hire someone remotely if it's the right person.
Right.
We definitely, we hire and fire on our core values, and we use a tool called the Berkman to make sure that people are a good fit. And we spend a lot of time early on in the interview and, kind of networking process before we make an offer. But if it's the right person, I would definitely be willing to accommodate them.
Awesome. Well, if you are an accountant listening to this, interested in the VC world, fund administration, and quite frankly, working at a smaller firm with you and the exposure you get to executives, I think it would be an awesome opportunity. So if that's something you're interested in, would recommend applying Segway Partners.
That's right. SEGUE.
Partners.com. As the guy FloQast with a Q, I get it all. FloQast. What is this? Don't worry about it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. Really appreciate you joining today. And like I said, apply if this is something you think would be interesting.
Thanks so much for the plug, Michael. And thanks for the time. It was a real pleasure to getting to know you. And I appreciate it. Have a good rest of the day.
You too. Thank you so much. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.